Rose's Song by Aparna Lakshmi here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Major protests in the Bay Area as a result of BART, the subway system there, shutting down the internet and mobile service in fear of a protest. We're going to look at this as a microcosm of bigger issues right now. Peter Fine is still with us from Seattle, who works with the group Telecomics, a volunteer organization that supported free speech and an open internet in the Middle East. Also, sometimes acts as a liaison to Anonymous, was one of the several moderators of the Internet Relay Chat for OpBART, the latest anonymous campaign targeting the San Francisco subway system. They hacked the BART system after BART shut down the internet and TV, internet and cell phone service. We're also joined by Professor Gabriella Coleman. She teaches media culture and communications at New York University. Her first book, Coding Freedom, The Aesthetics and Ethics of Hacking, is coming out from Princeton University. Give us the history of Anonymous, Gabriella Coleman.
Anonymous came from an image board called 4chan, and for a period of time, the name was used mostly for...
That's four, number four, Tran.
Chan. And the name was used mostly for what you could describe as anti-political activity, was for trolling and pranking targets. And in 2008, Anonymous started to prank the Church of Scientology. And then somewhat accidentally...
And why?
Because the Church of Scientology was trying to censor a video that had been leaked of Tom Cruise. They threatened lawsuits against Gawker, for example.
So Tom Cruise, the actor who's a Scientologist.
Exactly. So Anonymous started to prank and hack the Church of Scientology, and then they started to debate, shall we protest the church, actually on the streets? And lo and behold, they did. On February 10th, 2008, there was worldwide protests in Australia, Europe, United States. 6,000 hit the streets, and a political movement was born at that time. Since then, it's undergone many changes. In 2010, they protested the Motion Picture Association of America, as well as the Recording Industry Association of America, for DDoSing the Pirate Bay. But the interesting thing...
Explain what you mean by DDoS.
That's a distributed denial of service attack. And it's technically not a hack. It's when a server has too many requests, so it crashes and you can't access it. The users can't access it. But what's interesting was that this campaign was organized by a different set of people. And that is what defines Anonymous. It's a little bit like a Hydra. There's different networks and nodes and individuals who participate. But they really came to light in December of 2010 when, as you mentioned earlier, they hit PayPal and MasterCard after they stopped processing donations to Wikileaks. And it was one of the largest direct action campaigns, DDoS campaigns, ever against websites.
And, of course, they were supporting Wikileaks, which released State Department documents, the largest trove in the history of this country.
Absolutely. And they were also supporting Wikileaks' right to continue to host their servers. For example, Amazon had taken down some of their hosting for Wikileaks at the time.
Talk about LulzSec and what that is.
LulzSec really came to be in about March of 2011. They were a bit of an offshoot of Anonymous.
And they spell LulzSec?
L-U-L-Z-S-E-C. SEC is for security. Lulz is for the fun.
Sort of the plurals of LOL.
Of LOL, exactly. And they went on a 50-day rampage of sorts where they hacked into all sorts of corporate and government websites, initially saying that they were doing it for the lulz, for the fun of it. They retired after 50 days. They brought a lot of attention to the sorry state of security. And then some of the participants in LulzSec jumped on Anonymous, again, to start an operation called AntiSec, which continued with anti-security, to continue on with the hacking that they had started, although this time it had a much more political bent to it, an explicit political flavor to it.
Peter Fine, talk about how you got involved, and we appreciate that we can see your face, that you're able to talk to us, and how Telecomics is a part of this and take this global.
Sure. I am a computer programmer, and when the Wikileaks crisis happened at the end of last year, I was outraged. Just that the government and could pressure on large corporations to silence and stop the ability for this organization to receive funding. I made some videos about that, and in the course of looking for an audience for those, I stumbled upon the anonymous IRC network. That network is public. If you Google for anonymous IRC, the first hit you will get is one of the anonymous internet relay chat networks. I helped organize some protests in support of WikiLeaks. We put together events in 105 cities in 1 week of public planning. Shortly thereafter, I got involved with this organization called Telecomics. Telecomics is not anonymous. This is a separate group of people. There is some overlap in personnel. We operate similarly in using IRC and also in the ways in which we're decentralized and lacking formal members and any sort of leaders. But on the Telecomics side, where Anonymous is running around breaking things, Telecomics believes that the best way to support free speech and free communication is by building tools that we can use to provide ourselves with those rights, rather than relying on governments to respect them.
And where did you get
work got us involved.
Where did you get the term Telecomics, the name Telecomics?
It originated with a group of Europeans who were opposing a EU telecoms package about 2.5 years ago. And so for the first year and a half or so of its existence was largely a think tank providing political information working in the legislative process, as well as working on encryption tools. When things started to get a little crazy in Egypt, we moved into a bit more of a proactive role. We were very active, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria, trying to keep the internet running in these countries in the face of really almost overwhelming efforts by governments to shut them down.
Talk quickly about Tunisia. Talk quickly about Tunisia, which helped to spark the uprising in Egypt, and exactly what your groups did.
So during the events in Tunisia, the Tunisian government was blocking people's ability to access Twitter and Facebook. They were also sniffing the passwords of Facebook users by injecting some code into those web pages. And so Telecomics and Anonymous help provide people in Tunisia on the ground with tools to circumvent the censorship.
And then moving on to Egypt and what your role is, what you did.
Sure. There were really two phases of our work in Egypt. Some of it very similar to Tunisia, where we were helping people access Twitter, helping people evade censorship. And then things got really, really crazy when the government of Egypt basically pulled the only fiber optic cable into the country out of the wall. They more or less cut off all internet, cell, and SMS service throughout the country. Which forced us to get a little creative. We set up, working with users and ISPs around the world, we used some 1980s technology. We set up about 500 dial-up modem lines where people could call in and access the internet over those lines. We also sent communication and medical advice, such as treatments for tear gas, to every fax machine in Egypt that we could find, because that was more or less the only way we could get information in and out of the country.
And what you're doing in Syria, what Telecomics, what different hacktivists are doing in Syria.
Sure. The situation in Syria is a little different. Whereas in Tunisia, they did some computer trickery to access people's Facebook passwords. In Syria, the police just torture people, just outright torture people for their Facebook passwords. That situation is a little more precarious. We've been helping to provide people with encrypted tunnels called VPNs and Tor. To evade some of the censorship. We've also been helping Syrians to publish videos and texts and poetry that they would not be able to do safely or at all.
Could you quickly talk about how the media covers cyber activists like you, Peter?
Yeah, most of the focus has been on what the mainstream form of hacking, like what the folks at Lowell Security do, like what X has done on BART.gov. You know, and the original meaning of the word hack is simply to use a system in a way its designer didn't intend, to play a clever technical trick. And that goes back to the origins of computer programming. And so when you talk to a computer programmer who's like really in the groove and like writing good code, he'll tell you he's hacking code. That's something that is in some ways very different than hacking or defacing a website, but falls under that rubric of using systems in clever ways. And so, you know, I consider myself a code hacker, but I don't hack websites. I don't DDoS sites. I don't do anything illegal. My wife would kill me.
Gabriella Coleman, what about the rumors that Anonymous plans to take down Facebook?
So that was just announced recently, and interestingly enough, that was actually one campaign that produced a lot of debate within Anonymous itself. Sometimes there's a campaign that seems to carry a lot of consensus throughout the different nodes and networks, and this one was a little bit more controversial, in part because of the resource question. Facebook is actually very, very difficult to take down. It's a large company with lots of system administrators and servers. So some people said this might be impossible. And it's also a little different because it's planned so much in advance. I think many of the operations we've seen, whether it was Tunisia or BART, really bubbled up within a day or two, got a lot of attention, and then was quite successful. So we'll see if something that's planned so much in advance will take hold. Very
quickly, you've just come back from Berlin, where you went to Computer Chaos Club Camp. About 25,000 people were there. We just have about 10 seconds. The significance of this global movement.
Slightly smaller, 2,500.
2,500.
We were all camping.
Yes, that is. Even if it is a zero, that makes the difference.
And I think the significance is that there are so many geeks and hackers with certain digital literacies and technical skills, and many of them are marshaling these skills for political purposes. I think we're going to see this more and more in the past, and it has a long tradition as well.
Gabrielle Coleman, thanks for being with us from New York University, and thank you to Peter Fine joining us from Seattle with the group Telecomics. That does it for our broadcast. Our website is democracynow.org.